I was going to go over some differences in this engine. So this is 5.7 liter out of a 2019 Dodge Ram 1500. There's a lot of differences between the Hemis if you're going to drop them in the JLs. The difference in the truck motor would be a couple things. Where the alternator location is up high. On a car engine. It will be down in here. You'll have a different timing cover on the front of the engine, and that alternator will be down here. Where the difference is with that is where your electric power steering pump is mounted on the frame right here. If you have a car engine and your alternator's down here, you actually have to cut the bracket and move that forward about 2 inches to clear that alternator. Difference also with the truck engine is that it has a rear sump oil pan. The kit that I ordered states that you need to order another aluminum oil pan from a 2010 Jeep Commander. And all that does is pretty much put the sump at the rear, which on some car engines the sump will hang down in the front, which is not acceptable for the JL due to the axle and steering and different things. But the truck engine already has one in the rear. Dan at Dakota Customs said that this oil pan will work just fine. I actually tried to order the aluminum one anyways, and they told me they're back ordered for about 6 weeks right now. This one came in with a big dent in the bottom of the rear sump of the oil pan, where it obviously sat on something or on the pallet during shipping. So I went ahead and had to end up having to purchase another oil pan anyways. I just went back with the factory one, considering that they had it in stock versus the aluminum one, which could take up to 6 weeks to come in. Another difference I've noticed on this engine is in the instructions, it tells you to cut off one of the pieces of the AC compressor, and you chamfer out that inside, and then they have a flush setting bolt that goes in there. But this one's completely different. It's got these studs that stick in there with a nut on it, so that's something that I'm gonna have to figure out as we go along. The biggest difference would be the intake manifold on top. So if you notice, the throttle body on this one is facing upward. That's not gonna work out because the hood of the JL is gonna be so low to that you can't get an elbow in there to run an intake off of that. So you have to have a front-facing throttle body. Edelbrock makes an aftermarket one. They're about $900 if you want to go that route. I ended up going with an old one off of a 2010 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It had the front-facing throttle body, and everything else is relatively the same if you put these two pieces up to each other. Just the connections are a little bit different. On the back, if you come around here, there's some sort of a connector or some sort of a sensor right here on the back of the intake manifold. On the old one, there's nothing on the back. It is flat. Dakota Customs told me that you could use the Edelbrock one. They work perfectly fine. Edelbrock has nothing on the back of theirs, so I'm guessing that must have been an addition to something that the truck needed to read. So once I swap that out, I'll swap all the new fuel rails, the injectors that came off of this one right onto that other intake manifold, and make it that way everything's a little bit newer. The parts that you have to order, so the kit will come with SRT exhaust manifolds, which are shaped a little bit differently to assist with the insert of the JL. What you have to purchase from the dealership is 2 exhaust manifold gaskets, a dipstick, tube from a 6.1 liter SRT engine. And if you look down here, it's pretty much sole purpose is it's going to go underneath the new motor mounts that come with the kit. And this sits down in there, and it'll be actually up underneath there and hug it really tight. And that way it gets rid of this external to allow yourself some more space in the engine bay by tucking all that up in there. Here's the new oil pan gasket. This adapter plate right here is a must purchase item from the dealership as well. It does not come in the kit. That goes on between the block and the transmission adapter. The last piece that you'll need is this is an oil filter mount for a 6.1 liter as well. what that does is that bolts up right here and moves your oil filter to a rear position, because the upper control arm mount on your front axle is right here. And on non-lifted Jeeps, which mine isn't lifted very much, could come up and puncture a hole in the bottom of the oil filter if you don't run this relocation. If you have a super lifted Jeep, then Dakota Custom says that the factory one will be fine. Just keep an eye on it for a little bit to make sure that your suspension isn't flexing enough to actually come into contact with that. Other than that, this bushing right here on the back of the engine sits inside of the flywheel. The center bushing right here will have to come out of the flywheel, and he has an adapter plate that sits on there, and it fits in that hole perfectly fine to allow the transmission to insert and everything to be lined up for the factory transmission going into the 5.7 liter. If you choose to run the Hemi transmission, then of course that won't be a problem. Those kits cost a little bit more money, probably because there's some sort of TCM coding that he has to rewrite to have the transmission computer work that transmission that comes with the Hemi.